Good morning, and welcome to the 22nd Annual Walk to the Hill for Civil Legal Aid. Or rather, welcome to the 2021 Talk to the Hill for Civil Legal Aid. Every year, we are grateful that so many lawyers from across the Commonwealth rally together at the State House to make the case for civil legal aid. Obviously, this year, we can't all go to the State House together. So instead, we're bringing the State House to you. In just a few minutes, you will have the opportunity to talk with your representatives and senators. And I hope you'll tell them this. Tell them that civil legal aid is an essential service. If you remember nothing else, remember that. Tell them civil legal aid is an essential service. It's essential for our friends, our families, and our neighbors. It's essential for everyone facing eviction, deportation, or abuse. It's essential for the most vulnerable people throughout the Commonwealth. Civil legal aid is an essential service, and everyone who needs a lawyer should have one. Well, what a year it has been. Since we met together last January, our nation and our world have seen profound change that continues even as we sit here this morning. We've had to separate ourselves from each other, our children from their schools, and our families from their gatherings, all to help combat a devastating pandemic. We've had to continue to come to grips with the gross racial inequality and the systemic racism that plagues our institutions. And we've recommitted ourselves to working for change. We've watched as our country has careened into deeper division, and we've seen our democracy threatened at its very core. And yet, there is hope. We're hopeful that a new year, new leadership, and new vision can help repair our union. And we're hopeful that the future will see justice, respect, safety, decency, and the rekindling of community. Now, you are going to hear from some extraordinary speakers here today, and I hope that you'll leave informed, inspired, and energized. But there is someone very important missing from today's program. Every year, a highlight of the walk is hearing from the late Chief Justice Ralph Gants. Chief Justice Gants was an absolute legal titan and a tireless advocate for civil legal aid and those whom it serves. We deeply miss his leadership, and we deeply miss his inspiration. So let's hear some of his words one more time.
It has never been more important for our brothers and sisters who are poor, undocumented, or displaced to have access to attorneys who can enforce and defend their rights, articulate their claims and defenses, and advocate their cause. Because legal services provide the legal infrastructure, the training, the advice, and the community education that help the vast majority of Massachusetts residents, many more than the poor they represent, to understand, enforce, and defend their rights. With requests for help from immigrants who seek to become naturalized citizens, who fear the loss of their work permits, their housing, and their access to education. The anger and frustration arising from persistent unemployment or being vented on abused spouses and children. The working poor and elderly whose health care may be put at risk. More persons are losing their homes to foreclosure and their apartments to eviction. Veterans are still serving in foreign wars and leaving military service with a variety of legal issues that are made more difficult by the PTSD and traumatic brain injuries that they suffered in protecting our nation. What kind of a Commonwealth would we be if we did not protect the rights of those in need by providing them with adequate legal services. Because legal services ensure that the promise of justice for all is more than a promise. What is it worth to have a commonwealth where the poor, the vulnerable, and the challenged can obtain the legal representation they need? Tell them that that fight will cost just $23 million, which is roughly what the Red Sox are paying Hanley Ramirez this year. With 6.86 million residents in this Commonwealth, that comes to $3.79 per person. That is less than the price of one Beyond Sausage breakfast sandwich at Dunkin' Donuts. It turns out that it will buy you a cup of coffee or a cup of hot chocolate, but it will not buy you a latte. When you speak to these legislators, your job is simply to reinforce their understanding of what civil legal services do for the constituents that they sincerely want to help, and to remind them that funding legal services is not only the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. We are fortunate to have leaders in our legislature who understand the challenges we will face, who are committed to protecting the rights of every Massachusetts resident. Thank you all for helping our legislators demonstrate the greatness of this Commonwealth by empowering our most vulnerable residents through the advocacy of civil legal aid. You speak not only for yourselves, but for all those who have neither money nor power, but who might have the law on their side, if only they knew how to use it. Feel their hands on your shoulder. Speak their truth. Thank you all for your support and for your work on behalf of equal justice. Thank you so much.
Chief Justice Gantz, we thank you and we miss you. I'm delighted to introduce one of the extraordinary leaders of our Commonwealth. She runs what she lovingly refers to as the People's Law Firm, and she has been a relentless advocate for the people of the Commonwealth and for civil legal aid. Please welcome my friend and my former Walk to the Hill captain, Attorney General Maura Healey.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be able to join you today. You know, this annual Walk to the Hill is an event that I've always looked forward to, and I used to participate in it myself as a captain for my law firm years ago. I want to thank the Equal Justice Coalition for all of your efforts to transition to this virtual format so that we can continue the important work of funding legal services. I want to thank MLAC and all of the legal services staff across the state who provide legal help and so much more to those in greatest need. Your work today could not be more important as we face unprecedented challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. This public health crisis has shut down our small businesses and left our workers, students, tenants struggling so much. It's had this devastating effect on our economy and left so many people behind as it's revealed and exacerbated the disparities, particularly racial disparities, that exist within our population. I know that your work is more important than ever, those of you on the front lines providing legal services. And so those of you who are here today to help support funding for legal services know that your work is needed and you're in the right place. Civil legal aid is an essential service, so essential, and I've always believed that. And you know, I talk about the Attorney General's office as the people's lawyer, the people's law firm, but truth be told, the legal services attorneys are the people's lawyers. Our partnership with legal aid offices is critical to so much of the work that we do. You know, my office alone receives thousands of complaints every year, and we rely on legal aid lawyers to take cases, whether it's representing workers who didn't get paid what they were owed, preventing families from being foreclosed upon, or tenants from being evicted, helping people navigate unemployment claims processes, working with survivors of domestic violence, and so much more. The collaboration between the Attorney General's office and legal aid is extensive and ongoing. But we need legal aid to be stronger than it's ever been before. Every day we see the plight of so many in our state. But the good news is there's a way we can help, and that is by funding and supporting legal aid. We know that our legislators have a tough job this year. They're facing extremely difficult challenges and extremely difficult decisions. But I don't think there's anything more important, particularly in this time, of taking care of those who are most vulnerable. And that starts with legal representation. I know that all of you can go out there and make the case today, talk to people, talk to them, the legislators and their teams, about what's going on and what it means to have the benefit of an advocate. You know that, and know that your efforts do make a huge difference. So I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for your commitment to legal services.
Thank you, Attorney General, for your words, your perspective, and your leadership. For the last 22 years, the Equal Justice Coalition has been a collaboration between the Massachusetts Bar Association, the Boston Bar Association, and the Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation. We've been committed in that collaboration to a shared goal: ensuring access to civil legal aid for low-income residents of Massachusetts. But the BBA and MBA didn't just establish the Equal Justice Coalition. They have been our stalwart partners and advocates every step of the way. I'm now delighted to introduce first Denise Murphy, President of the Massachusetts Bar Association, and then Martin Murphy, President of the Boston Bar Association.
I'm Denise Murphy, and I'm the president of the Massachusetts Bar Association. While I miss the sense of togetherness that is unique to this event, I commend the Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation and our partners in the Equal Justice Coalition for continuing a 22-year tradition, even when we cannot gather together in person at the State House. I hope all of you in the legal aid community are staying physically and mentally healthy in this time of unprecedented demand for your services. You must remember that your well-being matters. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that civil legal aid is an essential resource for our most vulnerable individuals and families, and that civil legal aid advocates are essential workers. It is imperative that we support legal aid attorneys and the clients who so greatly depend on their services by asking legislators to fund MLAC's $35 million budget request for fiscal year 2022. Even in fiscal year 2020, during what could be considered a normal year, legal service providers still had to turn away 56% of eligible applicants due to funding shortages. These same fiscal challenges remain unresolved more than 10 months into the COVID crisis, but the need for legal services has grown significantly. With worsening health and economic conditions across our state, the number of civil cases involving critical legal issues has risen dramatically, as has the number of people who qualify for assistance. Speaking as an employment attorney, I know that countless low-income and frontline workers have seen their lives and their livelihoods upended by the pandemic. Employers across the Commonwealth struggle with maintaining the health and safety of their employees amid the ever-changing workplace. Although the state's November unemployment rate fell slightly to 6.7%, that number alone does not capture the severe economic and personal hardship facing so many working families, particularly in communities of color. Low-income residents who have lost their jobs and those who continue to work in high-risk environments to keep our state running must have access to justice and quality legal services when they find themselves in need. As attorneys, we have a shared responsibility to make certain that Massachusetts meets this obligation. By using our collective voice and lobbying on behalf of our fellow citizens, we can make a real positive difference amid this ongoing health crisis. I urge you all to join the MBA in contacting your legislators and asking them to support MLAC's $35 million budget request for fiscal year 2022. Thank you, be well, and be safe.
Thank you, Louis, and good morning. For many years, the Boston Bar Association has been proud to work closely with the Equal Justice Coalition to press for funding for civil legal aid. The reason is simple. We believe in the rule of law, and we believe that the rule of law is more than simply an abstract principle. The purpose and the meaning of the rule of law comes alive in our courts thousands of times every year. It comes alive when tenants facing eviction and homelessness ask courts to protect their rights. It comes alive when victims of domestic violence seek restraining orders to protect them from their abusers. It comes alive when immigrants seek the law's protection to prevent them from being separated from their families. And it comes alive when workers who have lost their jobs, something that has happened all too often in this pandemic, fight to obtain the benefits they're entitled to under the law. At the core of the rule of law is a vision of equality, a belief that the law should protect us all, not just the rich or the powerful or the privileged. But we know the rule of law can't defend itself. Without funding for civil legal aid lawyers, the lawyers who are truly essential frontline workers in the fight for economic and racial justice, the vision of equal access to justice that breathes life into the rule of law is really nothing more than an illusion. In Massachusetts, we are blessed to have so many lawyers who've chosen to devote their careers to serving the poor. And we are fortunate to have a governor and a legislature who understand and support civil legal aid. But we are still falling short. Last year across the state, legal aid organizations were forced to turn away 56% of the clients who sought their help. That is surely better than it once was, in large measure because of the hard work of organizations like the ones here today, but it is still a long way short of being acceptable. And so I ask, call or email your legislature today and ask them to support this essential work by fully funding MLAC's $35 million budget request. Thank you for joining and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you, Denise, for your powerful words and your constant support. One of the reasons that civil legal aid is an essential service is that lawyers give voice to those who need it when they need it most. Legal aid lawyers selflessly give voice to our neighbors when their health, their safety, their housing, and their human rights hang in the balance. Well, today, 2 clients have kindly agreed to lend their own voices back to us so that you can hear a bit about their stories as the beneficiaries of civil legal aid. I'd like to first introduce Raymond Mello. Mr. Mello is a U.S. Army veteran who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'll let him tell you a little bit about what Veterans Legal Services was able to do when he faced a crisis.
Hi, my name is Raymond Mello. I served in the United States Army in the 101st Airborne Division. I deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan. I currently live in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, in a duplex with my family. My landlady occupied the other half of the duplex. Back in February, I went to my landlady with concerns about hazardous conditions in my half of the duplex. Her response was to hire a lawyer to evict me and my family from the premises. I was able to reach out and contact Veterans Legal Services and their attorney, Julie, to find help in this process. My landlady's response was to first shut off our heat and hot water, then our hot water, and to blare music through the walls from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. And over 8 months, it was constant harassment. Each time my landlady pulled a stunt, I was able to reach out to Julie and the attorneys at Veterans Legal Services, who were able to get our hot water turned back on, get our heat turned back on, and get the music stopped from coming through the walls. In October, my landlady sold the home and moved out. The new owners of the home offered us a 1-year lease. And if everything goes well, it looks like we may be able to purchase the home. So thanks to the lawyers and Julie of Veterans Legal Services, not only were we able to keep our home and to keep from being thrown out on the streets, but now we have the opportunity to purchase the home. Without Julie and the lawyers at Veterans Legal Services, this would never have been possible.
Thank you, Raymond, for your service and for sharing your story. And thank you to Julie and Veterans Legal Services for your incredible work. We'll next hear from Malensky Oscar about how Greater Boston Legal Services was able to help her when she was wrongly terminated and denied unemployment benefits in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hello, my name is Malensky, and I heard about GBLS through my doctor. She had referred them to me because I was having some legal issues with unemployment in my job. During the pandemic, my daughter's school had closed, and I had to take some time off to take care of her. My job was pressuring me to return, and I was unable to. So they told me in order to secure my position, I had to take a FMLA leave. The FMLA leave was 3 months unpaid. It secured my position, my location, and my hours, guaranteed when I returned. So I did that during a pandemic with a small child. It was by far one of the hardest things that I had to do. I was struggling to maintain, and I started to fall behind on my bills. After the 3 months was up and my daughter had returned back to school, I reached out to them, and that's when I was advised by my supervisor that due to the pandemic, they were extremely slow, and they decided to just keep the staff as is. So he then advised for me to go on unemployment. Shortly after that, I was terminated. I had then decided to apply for the 3 months back pay, the 3 months that I went without pay, that my job had advised me to do in order to secure my position in return. When I had put in the request for the back pay, unemployment denied it. That was when I decided to take my doctor's advice and reach out to GBLS. I figured there was no way this could be legally right. Like there was no way this was okay. So I reached out to them, and I had about 4 phone conversations, I kid you not. And within a matter of weeks, they were able to have the decision overturned and my funds released to me. I do believe that if I did not reach out and have GBLS with me to help me with the appeal, I do not believe I would have gotten my funds released. I do not believe that I would have been able to get my family out of that financial burden without that. I do not believe that we would have been able to be in a position that we are in now if it wasn't for the help of GBLS. And for that, my family and I are extremely grateful for all their services and all of their help.
Good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our virtual Talk to the Hill. I'm immensely grateful for the time you've taken out of your day to join us. Thank you to Raymond and to Malinsky, who are willing to share their compelling stories today and to demonstrate how access to civil legal aid truly made a difference in their lives. I also want to thank each member of the MLAC board, the MLAC staff, and members of the Equal Justice Coalition for their support and their commitment to improving the lives of the clients served by civil legal aid. Thank you to the members of the legislature and to the governor for the increase in funding for civil legal aid in FY21. It means so very much. The increase in funding will help expand access to representation for low-income residents facing serious civil legal issues that threaten their health and their well-being among the COVID-19 crisis. And of course, immense thanks to each and every one of the staff who work at the civil legal aid organizations that MLAC funds. Thank you for your tenacity, your fortitude, and your enormous dedication to the clients you served and continue to serve during a most difficult year. This year has been a year like no other, as collectively we face the most serious public health crisis of our lives, with life-changing consequences for so many among us. We know that low-income and vulnerable people across the Commonwealth have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. We also know that Black and Brown people have been especially damaged by the pandemic, suffering greater economic and health consequences. As we move forward, we must ensure that Black and Brown communities and other communities that have been historically underserved have meaningful and equal access to civil legal aid and to our court system. As we look to FY22, we are increasingly concerned that the numbers of those who qualify for civil legal aid will continue to rise as a result of the pandemic. Legal aid programs continue to make difficult choices about who they can help and who they cannot help with the limited resources available. These difficult choices have been exacerbated in unimaginable ways as legal aid advocates strive to provide assistance to the many individuals and families throughout the Commonwealth who are suffering as a result of COVID-19. When the pandemic hit, legal aid organizations responded immediately and effectively and pivoted quickly to provide legal aid in a variety of new ways. They remained on the front lines, available and accessible to residents in need of legal services. What has become ever more clear over the past year to so many is that civil legal aid is an essential service, and civil legal aid advocates are essential workers. Civil legal aid is a significant and critical part of the Commonwealth's social safety network. Even with the hope of better outcomes for all of us in 2021, we cannot afford to lose our focus now. Clearly, there is still so much to be done. So please help us. It's great that you are here with us today, but the most important thing for you to do is to make sure you talk with your legislators. Talk with them about the importance of civil legal aid and ask them to support our request for $35 million for FY22. And now I'm so honored to introduce Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Kimberly Budd, a justice on the Superior Court since 2009 and on the SJC since 2016. Chief Justice Budd quickly established herself as an incisive and creative legal thinker. In nominating Justice Budd to become chief, Governor Baker noted not just her exceptional credentials from Georgetown University and Harvard Law School, but also her reputation as a fair judge and a great listener. The first Black woman to lead the court, Chief Justice Budd told the Governor's Council that she would come to the table with a different perspective on the world because she knows what it's like to feel powerless and invisible. As a judge, she said, she looks criminal defendants and pro se litigants in the eye. This is such a powerful perspective to bring to the Commonwealth's highest court. And that interest in looking into the eyes of litigants is so welcome to those of us who seek to give voice to the so often overlooked clients of civil legal aid. Thank you for joining us this morning, Chief Justice Budd. We are honored to have you with us and appreciate your commitment to pursuing equal justice for all.
Thank you, Lynn, for that kind introduction. I'd also like to thank the Equal Justice Coalition for all the work that's gone into preparing for this event, and especially for presenting that wonderful video of Chief Justice Gantz. He cared so deeply about improving access to justice. And in the work that we're undertaking today, we honor his commitment to that cause and his legacy. Finally, thank you to all of you in the audience who are taking time today to talk to your legislators about the urgency of funding legal aid for people who cannot afford an attorney for their essential civil legal needs. The tragic events of the past year have focused our attention on the many inequities in our society. The pandemic has created unprecedented disruptions in employment, education, childcare, and everyday life. And the resulting hardships have fallen most heavily on those who can least afford them. Recent events have also forced us to confront the painful, persistent reality of racial and ethnic disparities in our society. As my colleagues and I, the justices of the Supreme Judicial Court, stated in an open letter last June, we're constantly reminded that too often, by too many, Black lives are not treated with the same dignity and respect accorded to white lives. And if all of that were not enough, this month we witnessed violence in the halls of our nation's capital. We cannot solve all of these problems today, but together, as lawyers and judges, we can at least pledge to maintain a safe space where the rule of law is enforced and our problems can be addressed fairly and equitably. We can try to create in our courtrooms, our corner of the world, a place where all are truly equal, as the justices said in that June letter. To do that, we must not only have laws that treat all people fairly, we must also give everyone the tools that they need to understand those laws and to protect their legal rights. According to the data from the Federal Legal Services Corporation, over half the clients served by Massachusetts legal services organizations receiving LSC grants are people of color. If we are truly committed to eliminating racial and ethnic disparities in our society, one of the simplest steps that we can take toward that goal is to make it possible for more people to receive legal aid. We're very fortunate to live in a state where the governor and the legislature understand these issues. In recent years, the legislature provided steady increases in funding for legal services. As a result, we have seen significant improvements in the percentages of people receiving assistance. But legal services organizations still must turn away well over half of those who seek their help. They do not have the resources to meet everyone's needs. And as you all know, those needs are especially great right now with all of the problems caused by the pandemic. Employment, housing, family law, domestic violence, consumer debt, and immigration are all areas of particular concern. To meet these needs, the Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation is asking the legislature for a $6 million increase in funding for the next fiscal year. That's less than $1 per Massachusetts resident. Or, as Chief Justice Gantz might have said, it's less than the cost of a soda at McDonald's. Who would not spare an extra soda to extend legal aid to a single parent and children facing eviction, a veteran who needs help obtaining benefits, a senior struggling with debt suits, or a spouse seeking protection from domestic violence? It's a worthwhile investment, that additional dollar. For every dollar spent on civil legal aid, MLAC tells us, we reap roughly $2 in economic benefits for the Commonwealth and its residents. But more importantly, the additional legal assistance that dollar provides may be the difference for someone between having a home and losing it, making ends meet or going without heat, staying safe, or living in fear. Your legislators know this. They have constituents who have benefited from civil legal aid. And they also know how many people are hurting today and need help. You will not have to convince them. you will only need to remind them. Because like you, they are dedicated to making our society function fairly for everyone. This is the mission of civil legal aid, to promote equal justice for all. Your support for that mission and the support of your legislators will bring us closer to our common goal of building a fair and just society.
Thank you, Chief Justice Budd, for continuing the tradition of support for civil legal aid from the Supreme Judicial Court, the court that sets the standard and leads the way for equal justice for all. I'm now honored to introduce the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers, and also the Chair of the NAACP's Advocacy and Policy Committee. Please welcome Mr. Michael Curry.
It's an honor and a privilege to join you today to provide some brief remarks for this Talk to the Hill and the Equal Justice Coalition's efforts to make sure that we have legal supports in the communities where we need it most. I am Michael Curry, President and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers, and I also wear the hat of being a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors. I chair the National Board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. I can tell you in both of those hats the critical work of lawyers in this moment. Just a few months ago, almost a year ago now, we were experiencing the beginnings of a pandemic. We saw the health inequity that displayed across the country. We're seeing that now. I call that our national Katrina. We should have known that people who lived in congested households, who lived in poverty, who were dealing with food insecurity and housing insecurity, who were homeless, who were dealing with 2+ comorbidities would be disparately impacted by a pandemic. We should have known throughout this country that it would have played out that way, like we should have known in New Orleans with Katrina. At the same time, we should have known that there was a racial division in this country that required that we pay attention to the racial injustice that is as woven into the fabric of this country as apple pie and the American flag. That the reality is that many folks who are poor, who are Black, who are brown, are disenfranchised, are mass incarcerated, are dying of higher rates of disease, do not get the same justice in our courtrooms or on our streets, and are denied an equal education. So what does that mean for us as attorneys in this moment? And what is the focus of, part of the focus of today's conversation is around the partnerships that must exist between the legal community and others, particularly health centers, hospitals, civil rights organizations, community organizations, those medical and legal partnerships that have been so critical to community health centers across the country and here in Massachusetts. I'm going to urge you to think about this moment we're in, these two, as people call them, pandemics, that has given us some awareness to these underlying issues of race and health. We need our lawyers. If we ever needed lawyers, we need them now as we deal with the immigration issues, as we see immigrant communities, due to the chilling effect caused by public charge, caused by anti-immigrant policies on the federal and many places local level, has really driven immigrant families into hiding from getting the services that they so desperately need, that quite frankly saves lives. And when you think about public health, it is in none of our best interests if any American, any citizen, any resident isn't able to access healthcare. So we have a challenge. We need attorneys like you who are tuned in today to be part of this movement, to contribute to the work of the Equal Justice Coalition, my friends over at Greater Boston Legal Services. We need you on the front lines around eviction. We need you on the front lines around disability rights and access. We need you on the front lines around immigration issues and making sure people have access to care, the testing, the contact tracing, now the vaccinations, that they're not denied the access that they deserve. We need you on the front lines on these public health issues, because we need you at the front door and in the health centers as we engage patients to provide them care, and then refer them to you as attorneys that can help them deal with these things we call the social determinants of health. Those factors, those things that happen outside the doors of community health centers that has Black and brown folks dying 5, 10, 15 years earlier, that relegates people to poverty and sickness and poor health. That's where we come in as attorneys. I think the pandemic has really laid bare for us the challenges that we have that, quite frankly, we inherited. But we have an opportunity in this moment as we enter a new year under a new administration in the White House with renewed commitment across the country to deal with these inequities, but we need your legal guidance. Our communities need your legal support. I'm urging you and encouraging you to find those ways as legislators that are on this call to lean in and support these organizations that are doing this critical work. I have a phrase that a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the founders of the Niagara movement, which gave birth to the NAACP, when he said, "Nothing can be solved that can't be faced." Nothing can be solved that can't be faced. We are now facing the ravages, the impacts of this pandemic, the racial inequities that have been borne out over the last year, as well as the racial injustice. I speak on behalf of the 52 community health centers, over 1 million patients, and our many leaders and staff at community health centers across the state and across the country, when we ask you to lean in this moment as attorneys and be part of this moment that we hope is a movement that will change the circumstances in the communities that we all care about. So I want to say thank you to the Equal Justice Coalition. I want to say thank you to MLAC. I want to say thank you to those legislators that for the past 20 plus years have supported the work of these organizations in providing legal access. Now is not the time to take our feet off the pedal, off the gas. We now need to lean in and do the kind of work that Dr. King, as we just celebrated his life and legacy, this is the moment to address those underlying conditions that are impacting communities. So I say God bless, Godspeed, and I look forward to working with you now and into the future.
Thank you, Michael, for those remarks. You are a partner for Civil Legal Aid, and we thank you for being here to support us today. I want to state the obvious. These are different times. We can't gather in person, and if you've been with us in the past, unfortunately, no buttons or lunch. But the deal is the same. You've heard people talk about the importance of civil legal aid and how it has made a difference in the lives of our clients. All of our lives are different now. More people are struggling. Many more people are out of work. And just a note, in the last 6 months of 2020, our small employment law staff fielded over 3,000 requests for assistance. There are many more people who are eligible for our services. People are hurting, and many of our most vulnerable neighbors who struggled before the pandemic are at even greater risk today. We need increased funding to tackle this dire situation. Many of you helped us last year, and we really need your help this year. As you've heard, we will go to the breakout rooms where you'll be joined by other members. Here are some pointers. Make sure you have your fact sheets for the campaign. You can find them at ejctalktothehill.org. That's the site where you signed up, but also you may have received them by email. Basically, we're asking you to support the fiscal year 22 request, which is for $35 million. Talk about why you personally care about funding for legal aid. If you know of or have had to deal with legal needs due to the COVID crisis, Talk about how you helped. For instance, navigating the unemployment system or the healthcare system in these challenging times is difficult. It's important to acknowledge the need. We also have Twitter hashtags that we're using this year. Hashtag I Walk for Justice. And when you use the Twitter, you can also tag at Civil Legal Aid and at Equal Justice Mass. Let the world know that you're virtually at the Hill today to support funding for civil legal aid. You should also find a document with talking points. This is the substance of what you should be saying during your visits, which in a nutshell is increase funding for civil legal aid. We would also encourage you to ask your legislator to make funding for civil legal aid a budget priority and to let leadership know of your support. If a legislator or aide asks a substantive question about legal aid and you don't know the answer, tell him or her that you don't know, but we'll have someone from a legal aid program get back to them with the answer. And then make sure you let us know so that we can respond. We really do want you to use social media and to talk about why you're talking to the Hill for civil legal aid. If you can, take a picture of yourself and then share that picture on your social media networks using that hashtag, I Walk for Justice. And let's see if we can blow up Facebook and Twitter with these I Walk photos. And be sure to follow us at Equal Justice Mass, that's Equal Justice MA, or at Civil Legal Aid, the things that I showed you earlier. I want to reiterate that the purpose of this event is for you to meet with your legislators. I strongly encourage you all to make contact with your offices today. Please don't be discouraged if your legislator is not available and your conversation is with an aide. It is just as effective to talk with an aide as it is with the legislator. Your participation today will not be diminished if you don't have the opportunity to speak directly with your legislator. On behalf of my legal aid colleagues, thanks for coming. Now I'll return it back to Louis to wrap things up. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. Now it's time to get to work. And the great news is that this year, there's no walking, only talking. Thanks to the incredible power of technology, we will transport you to speak with your legislators in a breakout room. And when you get there, remember what Maura said. You, as a lawyer, know what it means to have the benefit of an advocate. Remember what Michael said, that now is the time when we need our lawyers. And remember what Malensky said, that she knew that she needed a lawyer when she was facing a situation and she just knew that there was no way this was okay. Tell your legislators that civil legal aid is an essential service. Thank you for joining us, and go get them.